Yeah, one of the things that I've dedicated a lot of my time to is ISO. And that's another example of how subtle the Greek language is in its, shall we say, ways into our language. The word actually is ISO, not ISO. And the organization was set up back in 1947 after World War II. And the reason it was set up was during World War II, the folks from North America arrived in Europe and discovered, to quote a popular term, they were screwed because nuts and bolts wouldn't fit together. Mm-hmm. The threads in North America were different from the threads in Europe. Mm-hmm. And they said, we got a problem. And so after World War II, the International Organization for Standardization, as it's called, was set up. And by 2 votes, it agreed to have its headquarters in Switzerland rather than in North America. The United Nations, you remember, voted to have its headquarters in New York. Well, ISO voted for Switzerland because it was a neutral country and it would not be contentious. It can be regarded as the United Nations of business, in fact. And over the years, they have, standardized a lot of things. First thing they had to standardize was their name. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to say that name twice, it's mm-hmm. such a mouthful, international, and I won't even say it. So they said, okay, we need a name that'll be accepted around the world. And the people who started this were largely engineers. They went back to the Greek language, from mathematics, and they said, okay, we'll use the Greek word isos, I-S-O-S. And of course, we've encountered that when we did school geometry, the isosceles triangle, 2 sides which are equal. And the Greek word isos means equal. So they chop the S off, and it's now ISO, meaning equal or the same throughout the world. So long story, but an interesting one, and puts a perspective that a lot of people don't have on what ISO is all about. It's about making world trade easier, enabling countries to work together more easily. I was in Kenya about 4 or 5 years ago, and ISO standards are being used there to enable them to develop their economy. Mm-hmm. So they're not dependent on handouts from the G7 and now the G20.
So it's going well in Kenya?
ISO struggles in some of the third world countries.
Yeah.
One of the issues, and we talk about it a lot, one of the issues in Africa is corruption. I'll be quite blunt. And we often encounter that in the registration process, where registrars are not as straight as they should be. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we're always working on is to make the playing field flat, mm-hmm. so it's equal throughout the world. But ISO 9000, which is the thing I'm involved in, we hit our million mark this year.
What does the 9,000 mean?
ISO 9000 is the standard about business. It's about how to run an organization. And it's about, let's call it a set of good practices that any organization can follow. It's not prescriptive. It's really setting out the basic things that a good organization will do. Who's your customer? Who you're providing services to or products to? Who are your suppliers? And setting that out.
And if a company follows those rules, they then list the letters behind them, don't they? Behind their name. Does that make it a more attractive organization for investors, for example?
What it does is it makes it a more reliable and consistent organization, and certainly for the customer that has an attraction because the customer has got a higher level of reliability, a lower level of risk. And we talk about risk a lot these days, Mm-hmm. So for the investor, the risk is lower as well. So, yeah, there's a lot of benefit, and particularly if you're an exporting country. And Canada relies heavily on its exports. And so, you find that ISO has had a lot of traction in Canada. In fact, a lot of people don't realize Canada is actually the world leader in this field.
Oh.
Yep. News for you. Canada was the first country in the world to create a national standard on quality. Back in 1974. The British would have you believe otherwise, and I'm allowed to say that, having come from the country. But yeah, Canada was first, and actually Canada holds the chair for ISO 9000. And, you know, we have held that chair for a number of years. And I guess it's because we're regarded as a, should we say, a neutral country, the peacekeepers, and so on. And believe me, there's a lot of peacekeeping in the world of ISO.
Really?
So is this what your book is about?
Well, the book here, Innovation Generation, is about really, let's call it life beyond quality management. Quality management, which is what ISO 9000 about, is really about getting the playing field level, getting the basics in place, and developing what's called a quality management system, a way of running your organization so all the pieces fit together. Having established a quality management system, companies then have got two choices. Either keep, you know, working on that, or saying, well, what's next? And in my perspective, innovation is what comes next. In other words, instead of worrying about today's customer, let's think about tomorrow's customer. And that's what innovation's about.